In this world, there are many sudden departures with various causes, but if you have to pass away because you're LGBT, it's truly condemnable. This true story seems unbelievable because no one would discriminate against the third gender to the point of sending them to heaven. Even more regrettable, the victim was a doctor, a respected and renowned PhD in the field. The perpetrator was none other than a patient with mental illness who also belonged to the LGBT community. You are watching the extremely puzzling case. A 16-year-old girl cruelly murdered a doctor for being gay on the Crime Channel. As usual, if this story leaves an impression on you, don't hesitate to leave a like as encouragement. If this is our first encounter, follow the channel and turn on notifications to stay updated with the most classic cases. The perpetrator of today's case was a 16-year-old girl with mental illness named Dionne Thames Williams. The victim was Dr. Gary Jenkins, a 54-year-old psychologist and renowned doctor. He was very kind and often helped those around him. Late on July 20th, 2021, the young girl was out drinking with two adult men. The girl confided that she wanted to target a gay man, and Dr. Gary Jenkins was her target. Dr. Gary Jenkins lived and worked in England, in a city considered populous with 360,000 residents, famous for its beautiful castles and rich history. The place immediately attracted Gary, so he had been associated with it for a very long time. Gary had a habit of enjoying drinks at home prepared by himself. Regarding his private life, Gary had two daughters with his ex-wife and was known as a family man. However, they separated in 2015. The relationship between his ex-wife, Gary, and their two children remained very good. On the evening of July 20th, he went out for a walk and to enjoy drinks. After paying, he did some errands, then went for a walk. While walking, he accidentally encountered two men and a young drunk girl who were embracing and talking in front of him. They then repeatedly attacked him with violence until he had to be hospitalized and treated for 2 weeks. As a result, he suffered a broken jaw and had many life-threatening head injuries. In early August 2021, Gary was discharged from the hospital, and the police had not yet found the three assailants. Thinking they might have repented and regretted their actions, all three were instead happily drinking on the street as if nothing had happened. Just hours after attacking Gary, one of the two men used Gary's credit card to buy alcohol. Eventually, what was bound to happen did happen. The first person caught was Strickland, 36 years old. Strickland had a drinking habit and was always in a drunken state. The second suspect was Jason Edwards, 26 years old, and the final suspect was Dionne Thames Williams. What surprised the police was that this girl was only 16 years old. The girl happened to know Dr. Gary when he stopped at a gas station to refuel, and she had borrowed his charger to charge her phone. After assaulting Gary, the girl went to a friend's house and stayed overnight until 2 a.m. when she received a text from her mother. Only then did she return home, acting as if nothing had happened. A few days later, she was arrested by police on charges of first-degree attempted murder while at her private residence. During the arrest, the girl screamed hysterically and couldn't believe it was real. Dionne Thames Williams' personality was very attention-seeking, wanting to be the center of the universe. Even when harming others, she was confident she would absolutely eliminate all evidence, and the police would have no basis to arrest her. In the interrogation room, she didn't say a word to any questions the police asked, showing a very uncooperative attitude. As for the two men accompanying Dionne Thames Williams, they seemed more cooperative in answering police questions. Through CCTV, police collected all data of the incident. Police found that Dionne Thames Williams and the two men had shouted in Gary's face, then violently beat and kicked him repeatedly. They both hit and shouted words of hatred at Gary's face. According to the testimony of the two men, they followed Dionne Thames Williams without knowing what was happening. Dionne Thames Williams knew Gary was LGBT and regularly met other men for intimacy, even frequently meeting in parks to be intimate. This behavior seemed very offensive to those not of the third gender. From this, the girl conceived the idea to take Gary's life, someone she knew, to teach a lesson about offensive public behavior. Since all three were drunk, no one would be sober enough to prevent this unreasonable action. They went into the park and encountered a tall, handsome young man. They immediately surrounded him and crudely asked if he was gay and if he wanted to be intimate. The young man refused, and the three had to accept because this young man was young and very tall. They would certainly have problems if they tried to force him. Among many subjects passing by continuously, the three targeted Gary because he had a short, small build and was middle-aged with weaker resistance strength compared to younger subjects. However, Gary simply thought they were a group of three drunk people who couldn't control themselves. However, immediately after, they began surrounding him, demanding money and phone, valuable things on his person. Gary complied, hoping they would let him go, but the trio's behavior increasingly crossed the line. They began using indecent words to provoke Gary. When Gary didn't react, they began surrounding him with violence, beating and kicking, until he could no longer resist and collapsed on the ground. All three's behaviors were recorded in detail by CCTV, so they couldn't deny anything. And when Gary collapsed on the ground, the two perverted men began removing his pants before leaving. At this time, there was a witness named Lewis, who was a passerby, and tried to save Gary by pulling the two men off him, but they behaved back in a frenzied manner. Lewis even lay down, taking punches from the three perverts. Finally, Lewis had to get up and call the police, or he might have lost his life at their hands. After Gary collapsed, all three people hugged each other laughing, feeling pleased and satisfied. In the interrogation room, Dionne Thames Williams said she was forced. She was forced by the two adult men to go along and act. She tried to prove her innocence by persuading a 17-year-old friend to testify that she was at the friend's house that night, rather than going with the two men. When police called the 17-year-old friend to verify, Dionne Thames Williams changed her statement to say she only came to that friend's house at 2 a.m. When the young man opened the door, the first thing Dionne Thames Williams said was asking if she could stay overnight. This young man agreed, and the next day she voluntarily cleaned the room and bed to thank him for his help. On the evening of Gary's incident, Dionne Thames Williams had no alibi. People were extremely surprised and somewhat disbelieving when they learned Dionne Thames Williams was the mastermind. They said this wasn't the Dionne Thames Williams they knew. The Dionne Thames Williams they knew was a gentle girl who very much listened to her parents. Her parents only hoped she would study mechanical engineering in university and later do work similar to her father. The surrounding neighbors truly didn't understand what motivation caused her to become like this. They thought back to 2 years ago when her parents divorced, and since then, Dionne Thames Williams changed in a negative direction. She began hanging out with delinquent kids in the neighborhood, regularly smoking, drinking alcohol, using banned substances, and ignoring neighbors when meeting on the street, instead of politely greeting as before. There seemed to have been a big change in the girl. According to neighbors, Dionne Thames Williams' personality also changed quite erratically, sometimes sweet and polite, sometimes cold and indifferent. At the time of the crime, she was still living with her mother. Some sources from close friends indicated that Dionne Thames Williams was gay. This seemed reasonable, given the girl's attitude of resentment and offense toward LGBT people. It seemed Dionne Thames Williams was psychologically affected after her parents' divorce and then discovering she was of the third gender and feared judgment from the community. Therefore, she grew to hate all who belonged to the LGBT community, as well as hating herself. As for Gary, he did not survive after the assault by Dionne Thames Williams and the two adult men. However, what he did for life was truly a beautiful picture. According to his wife's description, Gary was a kind person who would never hurt anyone, a very generous and creative man who dedicated himself to helping others. The entire incident that night was truly cruel to Gary. At court, all three perpetrators claimed they did not intend murder. They just couldn't control their emotions and behavior, leading to undeserved consequences. From the purpose of robbery, they turned to mocking and intending to violate Gary's body and excessive violence, causing him not to survive. Finally, the court charged all three with intentional murder. However, The lawyer defending Dionne Thames Williams argued that she was too young and was greatly psychologically affected by her parents' divorce. At the same time, Dionne Thames Williams was also gay, so she couldn't possibly have an attitude of hating gay people. The lawyer requested reduced punishment. The other two subjects, Strickland had 58 previous convictions. He never worked for a living but only drank day by day, robbing, addicted to alcohol to the point of mental instability, regularly abusing women and assaulting others while drunk. The remaining one, Jason, also had 35 previous convictions with similar charges. In summary, all three perpetrators in court did not plead guilty, showing defiant attitudes without any repentance or apology, completely denying remembering anything that happened that night. In 2019, Dionne Thames Williams was diagnosed by doctors with personality disorder and was contacted by Child Protection Services saying she was certainly a vulnerable teenager and innocent. However, in court she still didn't say a word of apology. The court sentenced Dionne Thames Williams to 18 years in prison. The other two, Jason and Strickland, were sentenced to 33 years in prison for their previous convictions. Even now, nearly 3 years later, no one understands why Dionne Thames Williams befriended these two men and drank alcohol together, having such crazy ideas for action. Dionne Thames Williams even kissed the two men after finishing in public. Was it really hatred of LGBT that made Dionne Thames Williams act so foolishly? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated with other classic cases. Goodbye, and see you in the next videos.